Amazon Go represents a step change in how payments are handled at point of sale and provides a revolutionary customer experience. You can enter the store, pick up any product and leave knowing your account will be charged. No need to fumble with cash or cards. The payment is entirely invisible. Visible payments as a business model are expected to be worth $78 billion by 2022. But to achieve this and to truly impact the payments market, the key issue of security needs to be overcome. Customers' primary concern when making payments is ease of use or the reduction of friction, as we have witnessed by the rapid increase in contactless payments. Security is certainly a major concern, but it consistently comes afterwards. It is the payments providers that face the regulatory burdens, thus bearing responsibility to maintain security. Truly frictionless payments require advanced security systems that can authenticate a customer and their payment method without causing friction in their customer journey. This requires a fundamental rethink in how we authenticate and secure payments, moving from static to dynamic data and from event-based authorization to continuous assessment. Security systems for payments are built around the concept of multi-factor authentication. The user needs to combine two of the following: what I know, for example password or PIN, what I possess, a card or device, who I am, for example biometrics, and increasingly where I am. There are of course exceptions to this rule. Contactless card payments, which rely solely on what I possess, represent a risk, as a stolen card could be used by anyone. To mitigate this risk, contactless payments are capped. Card payments above the contactless threshold are secured through PIN numbers. The card is what I possess, the PIN what I know. While this offers more security than traditional card signatures, it is a point of friction. The customer must present their card, insert their PIN, and wait for their payment to process. The PIN number must be memorized, and it is vulnerable to fraud and theft by over-the-shoulder attacks. E-wallets have been mooted as a means of reducing friction in a secure way. Contactless payments can be made with a device that is secured by biometrics. While this would, in theory, speed up the payment journey, in practice e-wallets are still limited by contactless payment limits. Furthermore, biometrics are vulnerable, as they use static data which can be stolen or mimicked. Moreover, static data requires a specific authorization event. A customer looks into a facial scanner or touches a fingerprint reader. This still inserts significant frictions into the process. For example, consider how frustrating e-passport gates are, or unlocking a phone with a wet finger. Ultimately, biometrics are little different to using passwords, secure but not foolproof, and still cause friction in the payment journey, with one additional caveat, and that is that we cannot change our biometrics should they become compromised. So, how do we create secure and frictionless payment channels? The answer lies in dynamic authentication, the best example of which is behavioral biometrics. Behavioral biometrics is the measurement and use of human behavioral patterns as a means of identification and authorization. This can take many different forms, from gait to typing style. This data is dynamic. Detection of pressure across a screen over time as opposed to an image of a fingerprint, or looking at angles made by a leg while someone walks as opposed to a facial image. The strength of behavioral biometrics comes from the continuous analysis of vast amounts of behavioral metadata. The number of parameters measured is limited only by the sensors used and the sophistication of the algorithms that learn from and decipher this data. This complexity in the datasets underpinning behavioral biometrics makes it extremely difficult for an outside agent to compromise. The patterns identified in datasets with so many dimensions are impossible for a human to identify, and there is no way to train a working algorithm without access to the specific user's metadata. It is only through machine learning that we can unlock the possibilities of behavioral biometrics. The algorithms used are complex, as they cannot be pre-trained to identify patterns. To identify a specific user, they must analyze that user specifically. As such, behavioral biometrics algorithms must continuously train on the same data they are using for identification. A simple example of how a behavioral algorithm can work might look like this. You should select behavior that is to be analyzed, for example, typing data. Then break up the behavior into its component parts, for example, key precision, weighting, general typing speed. This will typically encompass a very wide range of data points. Determine the frequency value for each determinant for the specific user. Then you should combine these results in a user profile. Apply a similarity measure between the generated profile and current behavior. Then you should determine a threshold value for generating an alert. Finally, verify users based on current behavior against the profile, accounting for the threshold value. As this simple model shows, there are multiple algorithms working, each underpinned by different machine learning methods. First, a user profile is created. This is a form of unsupervised learning, taking the relevant user metadata, identifying patterns, and building a profile. The type of unsupervised algorithm best suited will vary depending on the behavior being analyzed, as different behavioral metadata can vary significantly in terms of type and relationship. This profile can be trained continuously, and as such, the more the user interacts with the relevant device, the more precise the user profile can become. Secondly, current usage data is analyzed. This is still through unsupervised learning, but differs from user profile generation in that the data is time-limited. Patterns must be identified from current usage data, which means that these will never have the degree of precision of the user profile. Thirdly, a similarity measure is applied. This means analyzing both the user profile and the current usage data to determine a functioning margin of error. Just as the patterns within the metadata are complex and vary significantly from individual to individual, so also does the margin of error. As such, this must also be generated dynamically for each user. Finally, the user profile is analyzed against the current usage data to authenticate the current user. This algorithm takes into account the margin of error that has been determined to create a probability of the user being correct. This probability is used to determine whether an alert should be generated. The strength of this model is continuous assessment of a user, both in terms of authenticating based on current device usage, sensor exposure, and also in terms of refinement of the user profile authenticated against. This happens entirely in the background and requires no authentication event to interrupt the user's purchase journey. While it takes time to generate a precise user profile requiring other security measures in the interim, once a precise enough user profile is available, behavioral biometrics offers a means of authentication that is invisible, meaning that it requires no authorization event, is precise, meaning very low likelihood of false positives, and is highly robust and almost negligible likelihood of false negatives, for example security breaches.